Hey everybody, Mr. Egan here. And at this point, we have investigated this relationship between force, mass, and velocity a lot. And now we're going to take what we've learned and what we observed both in our experiment and the simulator and apply it to what's going on with our space pod and the situation that we see. So in an earlier lesson, we looked at how Dr. Gonzalez sent us an email about what they knew about the space pod situation. And they knew that the thrusters were exerting the same strength force as in any other mission, but they had no idea what was going on with the asteroid samples. They didn't know how many it was carrying. And they asked themselves, could this difference in asteroid samples explain why the thrusters cause a different change in velocity? So that's what we're going to look to really understand. If the thruster force was the same, as it always is for any of our pods, why do you think the pod's motion was different? Why did it change from what it normally was? Why did the space pod see, our space team see the space pod moving away when they regained that connection? So we know that in previous lessons, we had two claims that we were looking at to really explain what was going on. One of the claims was that the thrusters caused the pod to move in the opposite direction. So the pod was approaching the space station, the thrusters fired using that normal thruster force, and the thrusters caused the pod to move away from the station, traveling far away from the station itself. The other claim we have is that the thrusters only slowed the pod, it didn't stop the pod. The pod hit the station, which made it bounce off in the opposite direction. So same kind of beginning, approached, thrusters fired as normal, but now it's saying that the thrusters only slowed it, didn't stop it, it hit the space station, and now in time 4, it's moving far away. So we need to think of how would these claims be true? So thinking about claim 1 to start, if the thrusters on this pod exerted the same strength force as the thrusters on any other pod, what else might explain why it's moving in the opposite direction? What is happening? What could have happened to the pod, thinking about what we know from Dr. Gonzalez's email, to make this claim true? What about our pod makes this true? And then looking at claim 2, the thrusters only slowed the pod, it didn't stop it, making it hit off the space station and bounce off. If the thrusters on this pod exerted that same strength force as any other space pod, what might explain why it crashed into the space station? What are we missing? What in Dr. Gonzalez's emails? What did we observe in our experiments and our simulators to make this true? So as we look at each of these claims, as we look to answer each of these questions, we got to really ask ourselves, what could have happened to the pod to make these two claims true? And this is where you're going to go into task number 9 and essentially answer this question. Why did it move in the opposite direction for claim 1? Why did it crash into the space station, move in the opposite direction for claim 2? Looking to use information that we have explored both in our simulator and from Dr. Gonzalez's email to answer those questions. So at this point, if you do have questions, reach out. Otherwise, good luck.